High-speed pursuit continued for another 20 minutes, with Sarah pushing her F-22 to performance levels that exceeded every safety parameter in the technical manual. The mysterious aircraft maintained a steady lead, occasionally performing maneuvers that seemed to ignore the basic principles of lift and thrust that governed conventional flight. At times, it appeared to change direction without banking, accelerate without visible exhaust signatures, and climb at angles that should have caused any normal aircraft to stall and fall from the sky. Phoenix lead, this is Magic AWACS, came the urgent radio call from the command aircraft. We're tracking your pursuit, but we need to inform you that you're approaching the limit of your fuel reserves. Recommend you break off and head for the tanker rendezvous. Sarah glanced at her fuel gauge and realized the controller was right. The high-performance chase had consumed fuel at an alarming rate, and they were rapidly approaching the point where continued pursuit would leave them without enough fuel to return to base safely. But something about the aircraft's behavior had changed in the last few minutes, and she sensed they were close to a breakthrough. Magic AWACS, Phoenix lead requests permission to continue pursuit for another 10 minutes, she transmitted. Target aircraft appears to be changing its flight pattern. There was a pause before the controller responded, clearly weighing the risks of allowing 3 expensive fighter jets to push beyond safe fuel margins. Phoenix lead, permission granted for 10 minutes max. Be advised that rescue assets are limited in your current operating area. Sarah acknowledged the transmission and focused her attention on the aircraft ahead. Something was definitely different about its behavior. Instead of the smooth, impossible maneuvers it had been performing, the craft was now flying in a more conventional pattern, almost as if it were trying to communicate something through its flight path. Phoenix 2, are you seeing what I'm seeing? She asked Thompson over the radio. If you mean that thing is flying like it wants us to follow it, then, yeah, Thompson replied. It's almost like it's leading us somewhere specific. Morrison's voice came through with obvious tension. This is getting way beyond anything we trained for, Phoenix lead. Whatever that thing is, it's not behaving like a lost aircraft or even a hostile intruder. It's acting like it wants our attention. Sarah had to agree with Morrison's assessment. The aircraft's initial evasive behavior had given way to what could only be described as a controlled demonstration of its capabilities. It was staying just ahead of their formation, close enough for them to maintain visual contact, but far enough away to avoid any possibility of collision. Suddenly, the unknown aircraft began a gradual descent toward a cloud layer that stretched across the ocean at approximately 15,000 feet. Sarah followed, signaling for her wingmen to maintain formation as they entered the thick gray mass of moisture and turbulence. Inside the cloud, visibility dropped to near zero, and Sarah had to rely entirely on her instruments to maintain safe separation from both the target aircraft and her own wingmen. The F-22's advanced navigation systems kept her oriented, but the mysterious aircraft had once again vanished from her sensors. Phoenix flight, maintain heading and altitude, she ordered. Target has disappeared into the cloud layer, but keep your eyes open for anything unusual. They emerged from the bottom of the cloud layer into clear air, and Sarah immediately began scanning the sky for any trace of their elusive target. For a moment, the ocean and sky appeared empty except for their own 3 aircraft. Then, Morrison's voice cut through the radio static with barely controlled excitement. Phoenix lead, you need to look at your 2 o'clock position. Now, Sarah turned her head and felt her breath catch in her throat. There, hovering approximately 2 miles away, was the aircraft they had been pursuing. But now it was completely motionless in the air, defying every principle of aerodynamics she had ever learned. No conventional aircraft could maintain position without forward momentum, yet this craft was suspended in space like a metallic sculpture against the morning sky. What the hell is that thing? Thompson whispered over the radio. Before Sarah could respond, her radar warning receiver began chirping with an indication she had never heard before. Something was scanning her aircraft with energy signatures that didn't match any known radar or targeting system. The display showed symbols and frequencies that weren't in any technical manual she had studied. Phoenix flight, I'm reading some kind of unknown scanning activity, she reported to both her wingmen and the AWACS controller. Whatever that aircraft is using for sensors, It's nothing we've ever encountered. The hovering aircraft suddenly began to move again, but its motion was completely unlike anything Sarah had ever witnessed. Instead of accelerating gradually like a conventional aircraft, it simply began moving at high speed without any apparent transition period. It was as if the laws of inertia didn't apply to whatever technology was propelling it. Magic AWACS, Phoenix lead, Sarah called urgently. Are you tracking this? The target aircraft is demonstrating capabilities that are beyond current human technology. There was a long pause before the controller responded, and when he did, his voice carried a tension that hadn't been present during the earlier portions of the mission. Phoenix lead, we're tracking your position, but we're not detecting the target aircraft on any of our sensor systems. Can you confirm you still have visual contact? Sarah looked ahead at the clearly visible aircraft, which was now performing a series of maneuvers that included right-angle turns at high speed and vertical climbs that transitioned instantly into horizontal flight. Her F-22's sophisticated radar system showed nothing but empty sky, yet she could see the aircraft as clearly as her own wingmen. Affirmative, Magic AWACS. Visual contact is solid. Target aircraft is approximately 3 miles ahead, demonstrating flight characteristics that appear to violate known principles of physics. Another pause, longer this time. Phoenix lead, we're going to need you to document everything you're observing. Use your onboard recording systems and maintain detailed notes of all unusual activity. Sarah activated her aircraft's video recording system and began providing a running commentary of what she was witnessing. The unknown aircraft continued its demonstration for several more minutes, performing maneuvers that would have been impossible for any pilot to survive due to the extreme gravitational forces involved. Then, without warning, the aircraft stopped its aerobatic display and began flying in a straight line toward the California coast. Sarah followed, maintaining a respectful distance while continuing to document the encounter. Her fuel situation was becoming critical, but she was determined to see this mission through to its conclusion. Phoenix lead, this is Magic AWACS, came another radio call. We're coordinating with NORAD and other agencies regarding your situation. Continue to observe and document, but do not attempt to engage or interfere with the target aircraft under any circumstances. The implications of that instruction were clear. Whatever they were dealing with was beyond the scope of normal military operations. Someone at a much higher level than Squadron Command was now involved in the decision-making process. As they approached the California coastline, the unknown aircraft began to climb rapidly toward an altitude that would soon exceed the F-22's service ceiling. Sarah realized that the encounter was coming to an end, but she was determined to gather as much information as possible before losing contact. Phoenix 2 and 3, spread out and get as much sensor data as you can, she ordered. This may be our only chance to document whatever technology we're dealing with. The 3 F-22s deployed into a wide formation, using their combined sensor systems to gather data from multiple angles. The unknown aircraft continued its climb, apparently unconcerned by their observation efforts. Then, at an altitude of approximately 60,000 feet, something extraordinary happened. The aircraft simply vanished. Not gradually, not behind clouds or atmospheric interference, but instantly and completely. One moment it was clearly visible against the blue sky, and the next moment there was nothing. Did anybody else see that? Morrison asked over the radio, his voice filled with disbelief. Phoenix lead, the target aircraft has disappeared, Sarah reported to Magic AWACS. Complete visual contact lost at approximately 60,000 feet altitude. No debris, no exhaust signature, nothing. It's just gone. The flight back to Nellis Air Force Base took place in almost complete silence, with each pilot lost in thought about what they had witnessed. Sarah's mind raced as she tried to process the implications of the encounter. Everything she had observed challenged the fundamental assumptions about aerospace technology and physics that had formed the foundation of her military training. Upon landing, the 3 pilots were immediately escorted to a debriefing facility they had never seen before, located in a secure area of the base that required special clearance to access. The debriefing team included not only their squadron commander but also Representative Sapton. Sarah Phoenix Martinez stepped out of her F. F-22 Raptor, her helmet tucked under her arm as the Nevada sun beat down on the tarmac at Nellis Air Force Base. The other pilots in her squadron were already gathered near the hangar, their voices carrying across the flight line in animated conversation about the day's training exercise. As she approached, the talking stopped. "Nice flying out there, Martinez," called out Major Rick Viper Thompson, his tone carrying just enough sarcasm to make it clear he wasn't offering genuine praise. That barrel roll at 12,000 feet was creative. Sarah kept her expression neutral, though inside, she felt the familiar sting of dismissal. She had completed every objective in today's air-to-air combat training, successfully evading 2 F-16 aggressors while maintaining her assigned patrol route. But, somehow, her methods were always questioned, always scrutinized more heavily than those of her male counterparts. The maneuver was tactically sound, she replied evenly. "I maintained radar lock on both targets while avoiding their missile solutions." Captain Jake Bulldog Morrison stepped forward, shaking his head with a knowing smirk. "See, that's your problem right there, Phoenix. You fly like you're trying to prove something. Real pilots don't need to show off." The irony wasn't lost on Sarah. These same men regularly pulled stunts during training that would make a Blue Angels pilot nervous. But when she executed a perfectly calculated defensive maneuver, it was labeled as showing off. She had learned early in her career that being one of only 3 female F-22 pilots in the entire Air Force meant living under a microscope where every decision was examined and every mistake magnified. Colonel James Hammer Davidson, their squadron commander, emerged from the debriefing room with his clipboard in hand. At 52, he was a veteran of both Iraq and Afghanistan, with more than 4,000 flight hours in various fighter aircraft. His weathered face bore the lines of someone who had seen combat and carried the weight of command decisions that could mean life or death for his pilots. "Gather around, people," Davidson called out, his voice carrying the authority that came from decades of military service. "We need to talk about today's exercise." The pilots formed a loose semicircle around their commander. Sarah positioned herself slightly behind the others, a habit she had developed over her 5 years in the squadron. It was easier to observe from the periphery than to stand in the center and feel the weight of skeptical stares. Overall performance was acceptable, Davidson began, consulting his notes. "However, I'm seeing some concerning trends in our formation discipline and communication protocols. Martinez, your deviation from assigned altitude during the second engagement raised some eyebrows with the exercise controllers." Sarah felt her jaw tighten. She had descended 200 feet to avoid a simulated surface-to-air missile lock, a move that any reasonable pilot would consider standard defensive procedure. But, once again, her decision-making was being questioned in front of the entire squadron. "Sir, I was responding to an SA-15 threat indication," she explained. "Standard doctrine calls for immediate altitude change to break the targeting solution." "I'm aware of the doctrine, Captain," Davidson replied, his tone suggesting she had overstepped by explaining basic tactics to him. "The issue isn't what you did, but how you did it. Your radio call was delayed, and your wingman had to adjust his position to compensate for your unannounced maneuver." Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Steele Rodriguez, the squadron's second-in-command, nodded in agreement. "Teamwork is everything in air combat, Martinez. Individual heroics might look good in the movies, but they get people killed in the real world." Sarah wanted to point out that her wingman, Lieutenant Brad "Rookie" Thompson, had been struggling to maintain proper formation spacing all morning and had missed 2 radio calls during the exercise. But she knew better than to throw a fellow pilot under the bus, especially one whose father happened to be a 3-star general. Instead, she simply nodded and accepted the criticism. "Understood, sir. I'll work on my communication timing." As the group began to disperse, Sarah overheard Thompson and Morrison talking in low voices near the hangar entrance. "I don't know what the brass was thinking when they put her in an F-22, Thompson muttered. "She's got the technical skills, I'll give her that. But she doesn't have the instincts. Everything she does feels calculated, like she's following a checklist instead of flying by feel." "My dad always said women make decent pilots until the shooting starts," Morrison replied. "Too emotional, too hesitant. They overthink everything instead of trusting their gut." Sarah quickened her pace, not wanting to hear any more of their assessment. She had heard similar comments countless times before, usually whispered just loud enough for her to catch fragments. The frustrating part was that she couldn't entirely disagree with their observation about her calculated approach to flying. She did rely heavily on procedures and protocols, but not because she lacked instinct or courage. She had learned through bitter experience that any mistake she made would be attributed to her gender, while any success would be dismissed as luck or the result of lowered standards. The weight of being a trailblazer was something the Air Force Academy had never prepared her for. During her 4 years in Colorado Springs, she had excelled in every metric that mattered. Top 10% of her class academically, outstanding marks in flight training, leadership positions in multiple cadet organizations. But none of that had prepared her for the isolation of being perpetually under suspicion. Her commanding officers praised her technical proficiency and attention to detail, but she could sense their underlying doubt about her ability to perform under real combat stress. Her fellow pilots respected her skills, but kept her at arm's length, never quite accepting her as one of them. Even the ground crews, who were generally more open-minded than the pilots, seemed to treat her with a mixture of curiosity and protective concern, as if she were a valuable piece of equipment that needed special handling. That evening, Sarah sat in her modest base housing quarters, reviewing the day's flight data on her laptop. The digital readouts confirmed what she already knew. Her flying had been precise, efficient, and tactically sound. Her response times were within acceptable parameters, her fuel consumption was optimal, and her weapons systems employment was textbook perfect. Yet somehow, she was still the problem pilot who needed constant correction and guidance. Her phone buzzed with a text message from her younger sister Maria, who was finishing her residency at a hospital in San Antonio. "How's life as Maverick?" The message read, followed by a fighter jet emoji. Sarah smiled despite her frustration. Maria was one of the few people who understood the pressure of being a woman in a traditionally male-dominated field. As one of only a handful of Latina cardiac surgeons in Texas, Maria faced her own set of challenges and skeptical colleagues. "More like Goose," Sarah typed back. "Always the wingman, never the hero." "Their loss," came the immediate reply. "Mom called today. She's worried you're working too hard." Sarah's mother had immigrated from Mexico when she was 18, working multiple jobs to put herself through nursing school while raising 2 daughters as a single parent. The idea that her eldest daughter was flying the most advanced fighter jet in the world still seemed surreal to Rosa Martinez, who often joked that she couldn't even figure out how to set the clock on the microwave. "Tell her I'm fine," Sarah typed. "Just dealing with the usual workplace drama." You know she reads between the lines. She knows when you're not telling her something. Sarah set her phone aside and walked to the window overlooking the flight line. In the distance, she could see the distinctive silhouettes of the F-22 Raptors secured in their hardened shelters. Even after 5 years of flying the aircraft, she still felt a sense of awe when she looked at them. The Raptor represented the pinnacle of air superiority technology, a machine so advanced that its full capabilities were still classified even from most of the people who flew it. She had dreamed of flying fighters since she was 12 years old, inspired by watching air shows with her father before he passed away from cancer. He had been a mechanic for a commercial airline, and while he had never served in the military himself, he had possessed an almost encyclopedic knowledge of military aircraft. During those precious Saturday afternoons at air shows, he had explained the differences between various fighter jets, their capabilities, and their roles in defending the country. "Flying is about more than just machines," he had told her during one of their last conversations before his death. "It's about having the courage to push beyond what you think is possible." Now, standing in her quarters at one of the most prestigious fighter bases in the world, Sarah wondered if she had lost that courage somewhere along the way. The constant scrutiny and criticism had gradually eroded her confidence, replacing the bold instincts that had carried her through flight school with a careful, methodical approach designed to minimize mistakes rather than maximize potential. The next morning brought another training sortie, this time focusing on air-to-ground attack scenarios against simulated enemy installations in the Nevada desert. Sarah arrived at the squadron briefing room 30 minutes early, a habit that had served her well throughout her military career. She used the quiet time to review weather reports, study satellite imagery of the target area, and mentally rehearse the complex coordination required for a successful strike mission. Lieutenant Colonel Rodriguez entered the briefing room precisely at the scheduled time, followed by the other pilots who filed in with their flight gear and notepads. The mission briefing covered everything from target assignments to egress routes, with particular emphasis on the threat environment they could expect to encounter. Intelligence indicates the target area is defended by a combination of SA-6 and SA-11 surface-to-air missile systems, Rodriguez explained, pointing to locations marked on the large-scale map displayed on the wall. We'll be operating in a high-threat environment, so maintaining proper formation discipline and following established procedures will be critical to mission success. Sarah took detailed notes, sketching out the target area and marking key waypoints along their planned route. Around her, the other pilots displayed varying levels of attention, with some scribbling quick notes while others seemed confident they could rely on memory and experience to carry them through the mission. Martinez, you'll be flying as number 3 in the second flight, Rodriguez continued. Your primary target is the command bunker complex at grid reference 4587. Secondary targets include the communications facility and the vehicle maintenance area. Copy that, sir, Sarah replied, making additional notations in her mission planning folder. Thompson leaned over and whispered to Morrison, "Bet she's already calculated the exact angle of attack and impact timing for each target." Morrison stifled a chuckle. Probably as contingency plans for contingency plans. Their comments weren't entirely wrong, but they missed the point entirely. Sarah's detailed preparation wasn't a sign of weakness or overthinking. It was the result of understanding that she couldn't afford to make the kinds of mistakes that her male colleagues might be forgiven for. Every mission was an opportunity to either prove her worth or confirm the doubts that lingered in the minds of her superiors and peers. The pre-flight briefing concluded with a detailed review of communication procedures and emergency protocols. As the pilots dispersed to their aircraft, Sarah found herself walking alone across the tarmac toward her assigned F-22. The morning air was crisp, with just enough wind to make the squadron flag snap smartly in the breeze. Senior Master Sergeant Tom Wrench Patterson was waiting beside her aircraft, his experienced hands already conducting a thorough external inspection of the jet. At 45, Patterson had been maintaining fighter aircraft for more than 2 decades, and his expertise was legendary throughout the squadron. He had worked on everything from F-16s in Korea to F-15s during Operation Iraqi Freedom. "Morning, Captain," Patterson greeted her with a genuine smile. "Your bird's ready to hunt. I replaced the number 2 navigation light that was flickering yesterday, and we updated the software on the defensive systems during last night's maintenance cycle." "Thanks, Sergeant Patterson," Sarah replied, beginning her own walk-around inspection of the aircraft. "Any issues I should know about?" "Nothing major. The radar's been giving us some minor glitches during ground testing, but it clears up once you're airborne and the system reaches full operating temperature. If you see any anomalies during your pre-flight checks, give us a call, and we'll take another look." Sarah appreciated Patterson's straightforward approach to maintenance issues. He never downplayed problems or tried to rush her through the inspection process, understanding that a pilot's confidence in her aircraft was essential to mission success. Unlike some of the other maintenance personnel, he treated her exactly the same as any other pilot in the squadron. As she climbed into the cockpit and began her pre-start checklist, Sarah felt the familiar sense of calm that always came with strapping into an F-22. Inside the cockpit, there were no skeptical looks or whispered comments about her abilities. There was only the aircraft, the mission, and her training. The Raptor responded to her inputs with precision and power, treating her exactly as it would any other qualified pilot. The engine start sequence proceeded normally, with the massive Pratt and Whitney turbofans spinning up to idle power with their characteristic low rumble. Sarah worked through her system checks methodically, verifying that every component was functioning within normal parameters. The heads-up display came alive with a cascade of information, showing everything from airspeed and altitude to weapon status and threat warnings. "Phoenix, ground control," came the radio call from the tower. You're cleared to taxi to runway 09 for departure. Winds are light and variable. Visibility is 10 miles. Ground control, Phoenix. Cleared to taxi runway 09, Sarah acknowledged, releasing the wheel brakes and adding just enough thrust to get the 40,000-pound aircraft moving. As she taxied toward the active runway, Sarah could see the other members of her flight taking their positions in the standard departure formation. The mission would test their ability to coordinate a complex attack against multiple targets while defending against simulated enemy fighters and surface-to-air threats. Phoenix, Tower. You're cleared for takeoff. Contact departure control on frequency 285.7 after airborne. Tower, Phoenix. Cleared for takeoff, Sarah replied, advancing the throttles to military power and feeling the familiar surge of acceleration as the F-22's engines pushed her back into her ejection seat. The aircraft lifted off smoothly, climbing rapidly into the clear Nevada morning. As she retracted the landing gear and configured the aircraft for cruise flight, Sarah felt the last of her ground-based anxieties fade away. Up here, surrounded by the vast expanse of desert and sky, the only thing that mattered was her skill as a pilot and her ability to accomplish the mission. But even as she settled into the rhythm of formation flying, Sarah knew that this mission, like all the others, would be another test of her worthiness in the eyes of her colleagues. The question wasn't whether she could complete the assigned tasks. Her record proved she was more than capable. The question was whether she would ever be accepted as an equal member of the team, or if she would always remain the outsider fighting to prove herself worthy of a place she had already earned. 3 months after the training exercise that had sparked yet another round of criticism about her flying style, Sarah found herself sitting in the squadron briefing room, facing a scenario unlike anything she had encountered in her 5-year career. The emergency klaxon had sounded at 0347 hours, jolting every pilot on base from sleep with its urgent wail. Within 30 minutes, the entire squadron was assembled for what Colonel Davidson described as a real-world scramble. Intelligence reports indicate an unidentified aircraft has penetrated restricted airspace over the Pacific Fleet exercises currently underway approximately 200 miles west of San Francisco, Davidson explained, his usual calm demeanor replaced by the focused intensity that came with genuine crisis situations. NORAD has lost radar contact with the intruder, but satellite thermal imaging suggests it's still airborne and potentially heading toward the mainland. The briefing room fell silent as the implications sank in. After years of training exercises and simulated threats, they were facing the possibility of actual combat against an unknown adversary. Sarah felt her heart rate increase slightly, but her mind remained clear and focused. This was exactly the kind of situation her extensive training had prepared her for. The aircraft appears to be using some form of advanced stealth technology, Rodriguez added, consulting intelligence reports that had arrived just minutes before the briefing began. F-15s from Portland Air National Guard attempted an intercept 40 minutes ago, but were unable to establish visual or radar contact. We're dealing with something that's either extremely sophisticated or operating with capabilities we haven't seen before. Major Thompson raised his hand. Sir, do we have any indication of hostile intent? Could this be some kind of experimental aircraft that's simply off course? Davidson shook his head grimly. The aircraft has ignored all attempts at radio contact and has deviated from standard flight patterns multiple times. It's behaving like it's deliberately trying to avoid detection while maintaining a course that will bring it within 50 miles of major population centers. Sarah studied the mission parameters displayed on the wall-mounted screen. The intercept zone covered nearly 15,000 square miles of airspace, much of it over open ocean where visual identification would be extremely challenging. Weather reports indicated scattered clouds at various altitudes, with moderate turbulence and visibility ranging from 3 to 10 miles depending on location. Martinez, Morrison, and Thompson, you'll comprise the primary intercept flight, Davidson announced. Your mission is to locate and identify the unknown aircraft, then escort it to the nearest suitable airfield for landing. Rules of engagement are defensive only unless the target demonstrates clear hostile intent against civilian or military assets. Sarah felt a mixture of anticipation and pressure as she realized she would be flying as the flight leader for this critical mission. In all her years with the squadron, she had never been assigned primary responsibility for a real-world intercept. The fact that Davidson had chosen her for this role suggested either newfound confidence in her abilities or simple necessity due to the limited number of available aircraft. Time is critical, Davidson continued. Intelligence estimates indicate the target aircraft will reach the California coast within 90 minutes if it maintains its current speed and heading. Your flight will launch in 20 minutes, with tanker support available from a KC-135 operating out of Travis Air Force Base. As the pilots dispersed to their aircraft, Sarah found herself walking alongside Morrison and Thompson toward the flight line. The morning air was unusually cold for Nevada, with a stiff wind carrying the scent of rain from distant storms. Emergency floodlights illuminated the tarmac, creating an almost surreal atmosphere around the waiting F-22s. "Well, this is it," Thompson said, his usual cocky demeanor replaced by focused professionalism. "Real-world mission against an unknown threat. Either we're about to make history, or we're chasing shadows while some bureaucrat in Washington covers up a classified test flight." Morrison nodded agreement. "My money's on classified test flight. The military's been working on all kinds of exotic aircraft designs. Probably some black-budget project that went off course, and now everybody's scrambling to avoid an international incident." Sarah listened to their speculation, but kept her own thoughts to herself. Something about the briefing details didn't align with a simple navigation error or test flight gone wrong. The aircraft's behavior suggested deliberate evasion tactics, and the fact that it had remained undetected by multiple radar systems indicated technology that was either incredibly advanced or completely unknown. Senior Master Sergeant Patterson was waiting beside her aircraft with the ground crew, all of whom had been roused from sleep to support the emergency launch. Despite the early hour and rushed preparation, Patterson's inspection of the aircraft was thorough and professional. "She's ready to go, Captain," he reported. "Full internal fuel load, standard air-to-air missile configuration, and all systems are showing green across the board. The weather's going to be challenging out there, so watch for icing conditions above 15,000 feet." "Thanks, Sergeant," Sarah replied, beginning her own external inspection of the aircraft. "Any last-minute maintenance issues I should know about?" "Nothing significant. We replaced a faulty sensor in the left engine bay yesterday, but it's been tested and certified. Your bird's as ready as she'll ever be." As Sarah strapped into the cockpit and began her pre-flight checklist, she felt the familiar transformation from anxious pilot to focused warrior. The F-22's advanced systems came online with reassuring precision, each indicator light and display confirming that $40 million worth of cutting-edge technology was ready to do her bidding. The radio crackled with clearance from ground control. "Phoenix Flight, you're cleared for immediate departure runway 27. Contact departure control on frequency 327.8 after airborne. Good hunting." Sarah advanced the throttles to military power and felt the familiar surge of acceleration as her F-22 raced down the runway. Within seconds, the aircraft lifted off into the pre-dawn darkness, climbing rapidly toward their assigned patrol altitude of 35,000 feet. "Phoenix 2 and 3, check in," Sarah called over the radio as they formed up in loose formation. "Phoenix 2's up," came Thompson's response. "Phoenix 3's ready," Morrison added. As they flew westward toward the Pacific Intercept Zone, Sarah reviewed the mission parameters and coordinated with AWACS controllers who were tracking various aircraft in the region. The magnitude of the search area was daunting, but the F-22's advanced radar systems gave them capabilities that no other fighter aircraft could match. "Phoenix Flight, this is Magic AWACS," came the radio call from the Airborne Command and Control aircraft. "We're showing multiple civilian aircraft in your patrol zone, but negative contact on your target. Be advised that weather conditions are deteriorating along the coast, with moderate to severe turbulence reported below 20,000 feet. Magic AWACS, Phoenix lead copies," Sarah acknowledged. "Request vector to last known position of the target aircraft. Phoenix lead, vector heading 270 for approximately 150 miles. Target was last detected in that vicinity approximately 30 minutes ago. Sarah adjusted her heading and signaled for her flight to spread out into a search formation that would maximize their radar coverage while maintaining mutual support. The Pacific Ocean stretched endlessly beneath them, its surface barely visible in the pre-dawn gloom. For the next 40 minutes, the three F-22s methodically searched their assigned zone, using their sophisticated sensor systems to scan for any trace of the mysterious aircraft. Sarah found herself impressed by the professionalism and dedication of her wingmen, who put aside their usual casual attitudes and focused completely on the mission at hand. Phoenix lead, this is Phoenix 2. Thompson called over the radio. I'm picking up some kind of intermittent contact bearing 010 from my position. It's not showing up on radar, but my infrared sensors are detecting something unusual. Sarah immediately turned toward Thompson's position while instructing Morrison to maintain his current search pattern. The hunt for their elusive target was about to become much more interesting. Phoenix 2, maintain your heading and continue tracking that contact, she ordered. Phoenix 3, close-up formation and prepare for possible visual identification run. As they approached Thompson's contact location, Sarah activated her own infrared sensors and began scanning the area ahead. At first, she saw nothing unusual, just the normal thermal signatures of ocean currents and scattered cloud formations. Then, suddenly, her equipment detected something that made her pulse quicken. There, barely visible against the background heat signature of the ocean, was an aircraft unlike anything she had ever seen before. Its shape was completely unconventional, seeming to shift and blur as her sensors struggled to maintain a lock. Whatever technology it was using for stealth was far more advanced than anything in the American military arsenal. Phoenix flight. I have visual contact with an unknown aircraft, Sarah announced over the radio. Configuration appears to be unconventional. Moving to investigate. As she maneuvered closer to the mysterious aircraft, Sarah realized that this mission would test not only her flying skills, but her judgment under pressure. The rules of engagement were clear, but the situation was unlike anything covered in their training scenarios. She was about to become the first American pilot to make contact with technology that could change everything about air combat and national defense. The aircraft ahead of her continued to move through the sky with an eerie silence, its flight characteristics defying everything she knew about aerodynamics and propulsion systems. Whatever she was dealing with, it represented either a massive breakthrough in human engineering or something far more extraordinary than anyone in the briefing room had imagined. Sarah checked her weapons systems and prepared for whatever might come next, knowing that the decisions she made in the next few minutes could have consequences far beyond her own career or reputation. For the first time since joining the squadron, the doubts and criticism of her colleagues seemed utterly irrelevant compared to the magnitude of what she was facing. The mysterious aircraft suddenly accelerated with impossible smoothness, climbing at an angle and speed that would have been fatal to any human pilot. Sarah pushed her F-22 to its maximum performance envelope, trying to maintain visual contact while her wingmen struggled to keep up with the pursuit. Phoenix lead, whatever that thing is, it's not following any known laws of physics, Morrison called out, his voice tight with concentration as he fought to maintain formation. Our aircraft are redlining, just trying to keep it in sight. Sarah gritted her teeth and continued the pursuit, knowing that this encounter would either vindicate years of preparation and training or expose the limitations that her critics had always suspected. Either way, she was about to discover exactly what she was made of as a pilot and as a warrior. The chase continued across the Pacific, with the unknown aircraft leading them on a high-speed pursuit that pushed both pilots and machines beyond anything they had experienced in training. Sarah's years of careful, methodical flying were about to be replaced by pure instinct and split-second decision-making as the situation evolved beyond anything covered in any manual or training scenario. As the sun began to rise over the Pacific, casting long shadows across the ocean surface, Sarah realized that this mission would change everything, not just for her career, but potentially for the entire understanding of what was possible in the realm of aerospace technology. The question was whether she and Her squadron were ready for the truth about what they were pursuing through the morning sky.